Welcome to Imperfect Momming. Our children are constantly looking to us for examples. The term role model doesn't quite cut it here. We are shaping their worldview with every move we make. You see, it's not in the lectures we give or moments where we are actively attempting to teach them. It's in the micro movements we make, the unconscious ways in which we navigate life. We are constantly teaching our children how to show up for themselves, their friends, their future partners, and even their future children. So what can we do to ensure we are raising thoughtful, compassionate, self-aware human beings? We have to become them ourselves. No one is perfect, but we can still all be better, and it starts with self-healing. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Imperfect Momming, and we have a very special guest today, Debbie Gail. Welcome to Imperfect Momming.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. So tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So I'm a life and relationship coach who works with parents of teens and young adults with mental illness or addiction to help the parents let go of their fear and live a life of peace and purpose while building a loving relationship with their child. I'm also an upcoming author. I'm working on a book where I share my journey of the love and loss of my son through his mental illness and addiction.
I love the phrasing of the love and loss of my child. Like, I know that there's a lot of love and pain inside that statement, but I love that phrase. That really grabs me.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's actually going to be that part's going to be my subtitle, but my journey of the love and loss of my son through his mental illness and addiction, just because that was the best way to describe it. I mean, that was the best way I had to describe what I was writing about.
Yeah. And I mean, it does grab right at the heartstrings for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I sometimes ask is, how did you get into what you're doing? And your book kind of says it all.
Yeah. So that's exactly. So I've been a life and relationship coach for a while, but I didn't always kind of go in this direction. It wasn't really until losing my son. So he passed away at the age of 26, and 9 years prior to that, he was diagnosed with a really serious mental illness called schizoaffective disorder. And after that, he also became addicted to drugs and alcohol, probably to self-medicate. And those 9 years were very challenging. And I know I struggled quite a lot, and I had a lot of fear. I had to eventually learn how to have peace in my life, and it didn't come easy. And there were times when I felt so alone. And but I had a really close relationship with him, and that's one thing that I really am so grateful for. And so after losing him, it was really hard, and I would say the two gifts I was given after the loss were, one was just really feeling called to write that book, to share my story, to be able to help parents. And the second gift was just this really deep soul searching, where I really just, the best way to explain it was, I went through this period where I was rethinking my entire life. Like, why am I here? Questioning things about my life. And what I came up with is that what really felt like my purpose and my mission in life is to really help parents who are on a similar journey to what I went through raising my son. And I didn't want to I see a lot of parents struggling in their relationship, because what happens when we're dealing with difficulties such as mental illness or addiction is many times the relationship can break down because there's just so much conflict and so many challenges. And I didn't want I wanted parents to be able to have that really close relationship and that close connection with their child. And so many times I didn't see it. And I'm really blessed that I had that with him, and I have that with my other children. And so I really want to help parents to be able to do that.
I've always called my son my course corrector. Where when I was on the path I wasn't supposed to be on, he just goes meh, and helps me correct that course, whether he's aware of it or not. And it sounds like that's kind of what your son did in your life as well.
Yeah, and it can really be a gift, it really is a gift. And it's
you've used that word several
our children
times.
are just
gift. You've used that word several times, and it's funny because I just read a book that a friend of mine, she and I are both authors in this compilation book, and she sent me her piece to read, and she wrote that these events in her life were gifts wrapped up in sandpaper. And I feel like that's the most accurate way to describe these really painful events in our lives that we've chosen to find the gift inside, because I believe it's a choice. We all have these events in our life that cause us pain, that we struggle with, that teach us things, and we can choose to be inside the pain for the remainder of our lives, or we can choose to find the lesson and use that lesson to benefit and help others.
That's so true. I love that. I love that the gifts wrapped up in the sandpaper. It's so accurate. And I agree. It really is a choice. We can sit in the pain and we can be consumed with the difficulty that we are going through, and we can stay stuck forever if we choose, or we can choose to find something better, a gift, some higher meaning, something that we can do something meaningful in our life with.
Yeah. Because I know my experience with, my just being a human, my experiences through being a human were, I was stuck in these stories that I was telling, and I call them victim stories, because that's how I was feeling. I was feeling like a victim, like these things happened to me, and there's nothing I can do about it. When in reality, they are these gifts wrapped in sandpaper. And as soon as I saw them that way, although I didn't have the term until literally 5 minutes before we started hit record, before I started seeing them that way, I had a heaviness that I was carrying around these stories. And and I feel for people that stay stuck in those stories, when we hold on to the past as if it's something that if we wish really hard, we can change it. But the only thing we can do with the past is change how we look at it. That's where our power is.
That's such a good point, because you're right. So many people stay stuck in the past, in all this energy where they're wishing it was different. They're wishing they did something differently, or something happened differently. But there's no use in that. Devoting our energy to that is not going to help to move us forward. And one of my favorite quotes, I'm a huge fan of Tony Robbins, and one of my favorite quotes by him is, "Life is happening for us, not to us." Yeah. And when you look at things, and when you look at life in that way and say, how is it happening for me? How is this happening for me. It's a whole different outcome than when you look at it, life is happening to me. Because when you say to me, it's exactly like you were saying, we go into this victim mode, and then we're the victim, and we're just being yanked along to whatever comes our way. And it's true, we don't have a choice as to like experiences that happen to us, of course, but we have a choice as to how we view it and what we do with it.
Yeah, I remember this concept of being at choice. And there's a story that I heard through my coaching program where there was a woman who woke up next to her husband, who was in his 30s, and he had passed away while they slept. And she went down this path of self-medicating with drugs and whatnot. And she had a dream one night where her soul was in God's waiting room, waiting to be birthed. And God said, okay, who wants to teach people how to grieve? And it was her soul that raised her hand. And so down she went. And then God said, who wants to teach her how to grieve? And it was her husband's soul that raised his hand, and then down he went. And it's like, I get chills like telling that story. And the lesson that I pulled from that story was that my soul chose what I'm going through for some reason. And me being at choice is such a freeing concept to me. It was like, maybe not everything in my life just kind of melted away, but it was like, I chose my parents, and I chose my son chose me. I chose the relationships I've been in. And if I chose these experiences, then there must be some reason and some good inside of it. So I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that too. And it kind of goes along with what I've learned as well, is that, our soul does choose, and there is a reason, and there is a lesson, and there is a gift. And so it's being open to that way of thinking, being open to those gifts, being open to a different perspective, instead of just staying stuck in that victim mode. And kind of like what you said earlier, it's these stories that we tell. And that was a big thing, I know, at least for me years ago, is to when my son was diagnosed with the mental illness and started using drugs. And I eventually, part of my path to eliminating my, or reducing my fear, not letting it consume me, and finding a path to peace was rewriting my story. Because when we don't, we can really stay stuck in these stories, and especially becoming a victim and just kind of being dragged along, instead of kind of being more in charge and more in an empowered state in our life.
Yeah. So I'm a mom of a 10-year-old, so I don't have this experience of what of the parents that you work with. So what is something that you do to kind of help them through, to guide them along this path that you've walked?
Yeah. So the one thing that a lot of times when they come to me, if they are in kind of that fear mode, then we really start there, because it's kind of harder to work on the relationship with their child until we deal with the fear. Because what happens is even when their child is in a more positive place, maybe they're on medication, so they're the mental illness is more under control, they're not using drugs, they still have this fear with them, and so they can't be present and enjoy the relationship. So we start with the fear, and I basically work with them and teach them of how to how to live in an empowered emotional state, because we do have that choice. You know, we can, you know, that fear can come in, but we have the power to shift our emotions and look at things in a different way. And so there's a number of things I do to work with them. And, you know, one of the big things I've noticed that is behind fear is that need for certainty. So many times they're just hanging on to needing so much certainty that their child is going to be okay, that nothing bad is going to happen, that they're, you know, that they're going to stay stable, that they're not going to use drugs. And the thing is in life, we just don't have that certainty, whether it's with their child or, you know, with so many different areas. And so when we hang on to that certainty so much, fear creeps in even more. So I work with them from that aspect. Because that was a big piece for me as well, is dealing with that certainty and substituting something else, another need. And for me, the big one was contribution. Like for me, I found a lot of peace in contributing to others through, whether it was my children, whether it was volunteering, whether it was when I started my coaching business. And so that's what helped me, but it's also working with people to find out, like, what can we do to kind of, you know, shift towards instead of certainty, and also how can we meet the need for certainty in another way. So, and then the big area I work with them is the relationship with their child. And so many times, like I said, the communication can really break down because as parents, of course, we want the best for our child. We all do. But what happens is when there's mental illness and or addiction, there's kind of like this battle for control. Like we know what's best for them and we want them to do this. And we try to control things that we have no control over. And them as a, you know, maybe late teen, 20s, you know, whatever the age is, they're their own being and they don't want to be controlled. And so there's this battle of the wills. And, you know, over time, the relationship can break down, the communication breaks down, and it's very difficult. They no longer feel comfortable coming to the parents. They're no longer enjoying each other. It's no longer a happy relationship. And, you know, you just never know. Like the one thing I learned is we never know how much time we have or another person has. And like, I just feel so strongly that I don't want like the time to be wasted. Like I want them to be able to learn to have a good relationship with their child now. You don't have to wait until everything is stable and happy. And, you know, my son was on and off his medication throughout the 9 years. He was on and off drugs throughout the 9 years and put himself, you know, earlier on, I had more say in the hospitalizations and the treatments. But when he was older, he would put himself sometimes in the hospital to get help, sometimes in a rehab program to get help, and sometimes he wouldn't. And, you know, but our relationship didn't have to go up and down with that. Right. We could still I learned how to love him without having you know, it doesn't mean the relationship was perfect, but we still had a close bond. And that was just so important. And just like also, I work with the parents to be able to just have that peace in their lives. Like you know, we go through exercises for bringing in more peace. And, you know, part of that is related to, you know, the empowered emotional states where we deal with the fear, but just learning how to bring in more peace. And so those are really like the three main areas.
Yeah. And kind of going back to the first one, that fear that, you know, your child will eventually, you know, go get onto drugs because of their illness. And when the reality is that we're all capable of getting on drugs, you know, like we don't have to have this mental illness, as mental illness isn't a precursor to being on drugs, and not having a mental illness isn't a precursor to not being on drugs. It's just, you know, whether there's more factors involved. And so regardless of the situation, that's a possibility for our children. And so, you know, worrying about it isn't really something that's going to help that situation. It's just going to pull you out of the present moment and pull you out of the relationship now and creating a distance. And they feel that whether you are aware of it or not.
Yeah, they definitely feel that distance. And when you're always fearing these things about them, then it makes them feel like you don't trust them as well. And it really kind of it can put a wall up there too. And that's the other thing. That's the big thing. Sometimes when the parents come to me, instead of setting a boundary, they've just gotten worn down so much that they have put up a wall. And what I explain is the big difference is with a boundary, our energy can still flow. It's not blocked, and they can feel our love. They can feel all the love we have for them. When they put up a wall, it's an energy block. And even though we have a love for them, they don't feel it. And it's really important that they feel it. And especially when they're going through really difficult times, because if they have a mental illness and or addiction, life isn't easy for them either.
Right. Yeah, I think that one of the things that I've kind of recently realized was, I think I've mentioned it a little on the podcast, was this feeling like growing up that I needed to be perfect. And so I had made this connection between my actions and that my actions reflect on my parents. And so if I have that connection from me to them, I have the same connection from me to my son, that how he behaves is a reflection on me. And when having that realization actually was a little bit freeing, because I could remind myself that that's not true, that he is his own person and his behavior is his and my behavior is mine. And so I may have gotten a little off topic, because he came and gave me a hug and a kiss and drank out of my water, and that's a little distracting for my train of thought. But it's I can't remember what you said that sparked that, but you said something that sparked my remembering of this awareness that I had, that my behavior, or that my son's behavior, isn't necessarily a reflection on me.
Maybe just the part about control, like that could have sparked it, but I'm not sure I said that sparked it. But it's so true, because I do find that many parents, probably in so many different difficult situations that they're dealing with their child, but I definitely find this to be true when they have an illness or addiction, is that the parents take it on really personally, and then they feel they almost feel it's almost like a self-blame, and then they are, they carry this around with them. And when they relate with others, they are afraid to like let anybody know. It's like they take it so personally. And the thing is it's not their fault, and it's not about them. And, our child is just like you said, they are a separate being. They're not an extension of us. I mean, they were when they were in the womb, but they're not anymore. Yeah. And, we can only do the best we can as parents, but we don't have control over that.
Right. And a friend of mine is in the process of finding out if her daughter is on the spectrum, and she texts me on the regular, her anxiety about that and her feelings about it. And I have to remind her that, about what we were talking about earlier, that it's the way that you look at it. The way I looked at it was, I have somewhat of a guide that will help me understand my son a little bit better, because, you know, he's on the spectrum, and there's certain things that he does that he operates inside of that. And so it actually helps me in how I communicate with him, and how I, you know, discipline him, and how all of these things, because there's certain things that he does because of this. And I always saw it that way. There was a point where I was frustrated that people didn't believe me that he was on the spectrum. And I remember going to a support group for that reason. And then I saw just what a lot of other parents were dealing with inside their relationship with their children. And I was like, you know, this is like small potatoes compared to what they're dealing with. I'm okay. I don't need other people's validation about what a doctor's told me, you know? But back to my friend, it's for her, it's like, it's her fault that her daughter might be on the spectrum. It's her fault that she's 4 and they're just trying to figure it out right now. And I think she's comparing herself to me because my son was 16 months when I started the process versus her daughter is, you know, 4 years old. And the reality of autism is that it shows up differently in boys and girls, like so differently. Yeah. And it's a lot harder to spot in girls than it is in boys. Like, I don't know that they've studied it as much in girls as they have in boys, or whatever the case may be. But, you know, it's just blaming yourself does nothing positive.
Right. It really doesn't. And it's hard holding on to that. You know, it's so important to just not take that in. It's, you know, knowing that as a mom, she's doing the best that she can. I mean, this is the thing, is as parents, we do the best we can with what we had at the time. I mean, obviously, if she knew more when her daughter was, you know, 16 months, 20 months, she would have done something different. But we, you know, we do our best with what we have, and that's all we can do. Yeah. And that's what our child is doing too. Like, they're doing the best they can with where they're at as well. And it's not about us.
Yeah. There's so much conflicting information out there about what the right way to be a parent is. And there's, you know, people that say, you know, that every child blooms at a different time or blossoms at a different time. Well, the reason that I started looking into or going down this path with my son was because he was 16 months and he wasn't really talking. And, you know, I talked to the doctor, and the doctor was like, okay, go here and we'll do this and that and the other thing. And I just went down the path that was presented to me, where other people will say, it's fine. They can, I mean, some kids don't talk until they're 4 and they're fine. And it's cool. And it's like, to each their own. Follow the path that you want to follow, but don't beat yourself up because you followed the path that you think you should have followed a different one later on, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Because otherwise it's not a good use of your energy to spend on that.
Exactly. Is there a piece of advice that you want to share with our mom listeners?
There really is. And this is something that I've realized so much more now after losing my son, is that each moment is just so precious. And, you know, we just never know what's going to happen in life. And so just it's making that choice to be present now, to be there with our child, to learn how to focus on the love and to really just cherish each moment that we do have with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of that, cherishing that moment, is being present in the moment. And if you're fearing about the future, then you're not present in the moment.
Yeah, it really is. And I've helped clients get out of that so that they can really enjoy the time with their child, and it makes a difference, and their child feels it.
Yeah. Is there a book that you want to share that's been part of your personal development journey?
Sure. There's so many books I love. Like there's so many great books out there, but one that stands out to me that I read several years ago, and I still come back to, it's called The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. Mm-hmm. And it really talks a lot about this idea of inner peace. And I really love the part that in there that talks about like your inner roommate, because we all have this dialogue in our head that will just get out of hand if we let it. And it's really becoming aware of that, of what's going on. And I just absolutely love that book.
I feel like that sounds super familiar, and I want to look at my Audible real quick and see if that was one of them. One of my friends had recommended a book that had a lot about the inner dialogue that we have. And
yeah, because it really prevents us from that inner peace. It really does. And yeah, I love that book so much. I have it on audio book, and I have it on I have a physical book. So it's kind of one of those that's worth having. That's
the one that she recommended, was The Untethered Soul. And I remember listening to just the intro of it, because I bounce around from book to book more than I'd like to admit. But I have 20 books. I have 59 titles in my Audible, and I've probably read 15 of them to completion. And I have 3 more credits to use. Anyway, well, where can our listeners find you?
So my website is Debbie Gail Coaching, and Gail is Gail, DebbieGailCoaching.com, and I'm on Facebook under Debbie Gail and Debbie Gail Coaching. I also have a free Facebook group. It's called Loving Parents of Teens and Young Adults with Mental Illness or Addiction. And I share a lot of free videos, posts, advice. I give support in there too. So I would love for anybody listening to join.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time today and our co-creation of this conversation. And I feel like there's a lot of moms out there that needed to hear this message.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed being on your show today, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. So we'll have another episode of Imperfect Momming for you next week. And until then, keep healing. Bye, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to Imperfect Momming. It's time for us to step up and realize that our power is not in trying to shape our children. Our power lies in shaping ourselves into the people we want our children to model themselves after. Don't just do it for your kids. Do it for yourself. When you become a more self-aware, compassionate, and confident person, you and everyone around you benefit. For more information about me and my work, visit AlysiaLyons.com. That's AlysiaLyons.com. See you next time.